You're listening to the Gender Reveal Party podcast. I'm your host, Jay Pryor. This isn't your usual gender reveal party. There will be no baby sex parts. This is the real reveal, where we reveal gender through stories of brave humans willing to share their lived experience. Enjoy the listening. I sure enjoy making it. Hey, and welcome back to the Gender Reveal Party podcast. I'm Jay Pryor, your host, and I'm delighted to have my guest today, Suzanne Wheeler. Hello, my friend. Welcome to the Gender Reveal Party.
Hello,
podcast.
Jay. Thanks for having me here.
Yeah, I'm delighted to have you here. So, Suzanne and I we haven't known each other that long, but we know each other through the LGBTQ Mid-America Chamber, which is located in Kansas City, and Suzanne is the executive director there. And I sure appreciate the work you do over there. And unfortunately, I haven't got to see you in person because of the COVID, but I love being a member of that chamber, and I really appreciate all the work that you all do.
Oh yeah, it's been too long since we've seen one another, and we love having you as a member. And the chamber really is kind of a place of passion for me because I have one of the ways you create equity for groups of people is through the economy, and that's what we're all about.
Yeah, and businesses really, I think, set the tone. I think a lot in the world, especially corporations, can really lead the wave of equity if they want to. And so I love that we get to
Oh
do that,
yeah,
right? Yeah, it's
yeah,
good stuff.
definitely,
Yes.
definitely. It's a
So
wonderful job of passion.
yeah. So before I'm going to have you introduce yourself real quick. Before we do that, we have a new sponsor that I want to share with you. I'm super excited about it. Our very first sponsor, and it's fireandbliss.com. Do you and Marcia buy art?
Yes, we do.
Oh, cool. Well, you're going to love this because this is the only one that I know of anyway that specializes in art made by queer people and or black and indigenous people of color and allies. So like every piece of art that you go look at fireandbliss.com is, queer people or a black and indigenous person of color. So
Oh,
that's
that sounds so cool.
right. It's the first cool thing. And then the second of all, it's like, how do you know when you buy art from people? Like, here's what I'm starting to understand is how much of the money goes to the artist, right? If you're going to buy it from someplace. So
Yeah.
this is like, this money is going to the artist, right? I mean, I am 100% clear. And I love this group, fireandbliss.com. So they've helped, I got to curate a collection there. So if you go to fireandbliss.com/reveal, you'll see my collection. I just bought a piece. It's called the Sea Turtle Rainbow, and it's done with stippling, and it's a sea turtle and rainbow
Oh, cool.
colors. Oh, it's super cool. I'm super excited. I can't wait to get it. It's going to go on my office wall. And uh, and so for our listeners, if you go to Fire and Bliss and you use reveal as the word reveal, you'll get a 20% discount off your first purchase. So I'm super excited to say that and tell everybody because we've never had a sponsor before. So I'm like, yay, we have a sponsor. It's good news.
Well, it sounds like a great sponsor too.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, they're perfect for us. I mean, I appreciate what they're up to. So so
Awesome.
so and I'm like this podcast thing is new to me, so I never know when to say this stuff. So I just did it at the beginning so people would know we have this new sponsor. I'm excited about it. And I'm excited about you being here. And will you tell your story? Like, tell us your story. We want to hear
Yeah.
it.
I grew up in the Kansas City area, actually Olathe, Kansas. I left home in the early 80s, and went off to college and then to the military for a 32-year career.
That's what I thought. You're
Um,
a career army, right?
yes,
Okay.
career
I
army.
was I was afraid if I said the wrong one because
Retired.
I was Army Reserves, but I was in the military enough to know that you don't say the wrong branch, right?
Oh yeah,
You don't want to say the
yeah,
wrong branch.
yeah,
So yeah, Army. So
definitely, because we always love to give other branches a hard time.
right,
So
exactly, right. We don't like the
yeah,
jarheads and the yeah.
yeah.
So 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 this is and so tell us what you did in the Army.
I was an armor cavalry officer.
What's armor
So
cavalry officer? Say more about that.
it's one of those people who rides on tanks and rides on Bradleys. You're out in front. of major combat formations. And it sounds really cool, but when you're an officer, you only get to do that stuff for a very little piece of your career. And then the rest of your time is spent doing all different kinds of things. And I primarily spent most of my career in operations and training.
Mm-hmm.
So figuring out how to best train troops, um, uh, uh, and then assisting in operations at very high levels and writing orders, doing all that kind of stuff.
Yeah.
All the tactic strategy. And then I also had some opportunities to work in policy too, which was a lot of fun. Especially when it came to um, dealing with overseas environments and that kind of stuff. And so I had a very thrilling, wonderful career. The I'm an out trans woman. Didn't mention that at the beginning of the podcast, but I knew at a very early age about my gender identity. I would, if you had asked the 5-year-old Suzanne, she would have told you I'm a girl, and I was insistent that way until about age 13. Um, my mom was supportive. My dad, it was to my dad's chagrin because I come from a military family, and but I got beat up when I was 13 years old, and actually put in a hospital.
Oh.
And when my father came in, and again, this is late 70s, when my father came into the emergency room, he said, if you weren't such a sissy, these things wouldn't happen to you.
Oh.
And that really drove, to me, that was a seminal moment in my life, because that drove me into that closet. I realized that I was, at that point in time, I started to feel like I was letting everybody down by being who I was. And so I set off to be the manliest man who ever man. And that was part of the motivation behind joining the military. But I was always interested in it, always wanted to serve. Very much about that part of the oath that's the protect and defend the Constitution. And so that's kind of how I ended up in the military.
Yeah.
And,
No, that makes
and
perfect sense.
obviously, in the military, one of the things, it's a very hyper masculine environment, but I also tell people, to me, it was almost degendered in a way, because you have a very specific standard on how you were supposed to look, what you were supposed to do, all of those things. So I thrived in that environment because it kind of almost took that pressure off of me
100%.
to be a certain way, focused on gender and more focusing on being a soldier. I guess soldiering became my gender. As I got a little bit older, it was harder to keep the feelings of gender underwater. I always describe it like a beach ball. Hold a beach ball underwater only so long, and then eventually it's going to explode to the top.
Yeah.
And it started popping up around in my mid 30s, and started huge feelings of guilt. I was letting my family down, worrying about my career, all of those things. So I wrestled with that for about 13 years, and finally said I couldn't take it anymore. Came out to my leadership and let them know that I was trans. It was received very well. But unfortunately, at that point in time, in 2014, um, the transgender service ban was still in place. And when they discharge you for being trans, they discharge you basically under a medical discharge, is how they were doing it at that point in time. And they started my packet for my medical discharge. And actually, I wasn't going to be discharged, I was going to be retired. And I was like, okay, bit the bullet, understood this is going to happen. I'm going to end my career a little bit early. Um, I got a call from the Undersecretary of Defense for Manpower Affairs. And she said, this was on a Friday. And her secretary told me that she wanted me in the office on Tuesday morning at 10 a.m. And I thought, oh my gosh, here I am. I was a colonel at that point in time. And I thought, I'm going to Leavenworth. They're not going to put me out on a military discharge. They're going to go after me for something like conduct unbecoming or something like that and throw me in Leavenworth for years.
Yeah, that's terrifying.
It,
I can't even
really
imagine.
was.
Oh my God. Your brain must have just gone nuts with what they could possibly do to you.
Oh yeah, I went down every bad scenario possible,
of course,
and no good scenarios.
No.
Well, maybe they're gonna.
Right.
And so I got in the undersecretary's office, and she had my packet sitting on the center of her desk, and said, "Right now, you are, as far as we know, the highest ranking out trans individual in the military." And I was like, yes. And she picked up her packet and she said, this is what we're going to do with this, and opened her desk drawer and put my packet in her desk drawer and said, it's not going to go any farther forward. And she told me, we've got work for you to do. And at that point in time, I started working with the Obama administration, and they had been working with the Williams Institute and with Palm Center on lifting the ban. And I essentially got to start working with folks inside the Pentagon in the personnel arena around how to get that through, and also what future policies should look like when that ban was lifted. And then I also got to go over to the Hill and work with a lot of the folks in the House and Senate Armed Services Committee on the lifting of the ban. So it was really interesting. Very interesting period of my life too, because when I was in the Pentagon, I was in uniform. And because there were no policies in place for trans individuals at that point in time, when I was in uniform, I had to present mail. But I had also started living my life as my authentic, full time as my authentic self. So when I went over to the Hill to lobby, you never go in uniform unless you're doing formal testimony. I would go in civilian clothes, so I'd present as my authentic self. So it was a very confusing time.
I bet. And where were you living at the time that this all went down?
I was living here in Kansas. I was actually assigned to the Kansas National Guard at that point, as a full-time as a full-time officer with them. But I've been so my job, I was assigned as the director of operations for the Kansas National Guard.
Yeah.
But about 3 days a week I was spending in DC. So it was just a little bit.
Wow. That is quite a story, my friend. What a beautiful story. I mean, it's like, isn't it amazing just by coming out and being your authentic self? I mean, then you get to make this huge difference for all the rest of the people who want to serve, right? I mean, and
Oh yeah,
there's something
yeah.
that people who don't want to serve or don't understand military, they don't understand. Like I've had so many people be like, "Why the hell would you want to serve in the military? Like, why do you care if you want to serve in the military?" I wanted to serve in the military because I loved it. I mean, for me, playing Army was my favorite game growing up. Number one. Then I went straight in the Army, and granted, for me, I was a suicidal, drunken mess at the time. I was a senior in high school, and saw this commercial for "Be All You Can Be," and I'm in, right? So that literally was what got me in the military. But man, if I could have served and been out, that was my preferred scenario.
Oh
Right?
yeah,
But
yeah.
they gave me a choice, and it's really funny because I was a reservist. And I mean, different time, a different world, you would have been my CO or something. But like, um, but I was a reservist here, and when I came out, I was in the psychiatric unit. And when I came out, they basically were so kind to me, and I'm so grateful that my unit did this because they liked me. They gave me a medical discharge because I had been 1 pound overweight at my last
Oh
weigh-in.
wow.
Yeah.
Okay.
Otherwise, back then in 1984, 85, it was
Yeah.
85, 86, or it was 85 when I got out. In 1985, no matter what, if you were queer in the military, it was a dishonorable discharge.
Yes.
And
Yeah. Okay.
and I knew that. I was screwed. I was like, oh, well, if I get out, dishonorable discharge. And they came back and were like, "You're a kid. We like you. You were 1 pound overweight. We're going to give you medical discharge." And that was like, okay, good. But if I had my
Yeah.
preference, I'd have stayed in, but I couldn't. For me, it was
Oh
like,
yeah.
if I don't
Yeah.
come out, I'm gonna die. Right? So I need to come out or die, and they wouldn't let me be out in the military.
Yeah.
So, but if I could have served, I would have, because I loved the military, and I felt.
Oh
And
yeah.
again, for me, I really understood. Like, it was a different thing for me around gender at the time because I was a woman in Army with all these other women. But there was all the pressure was off around being a woman and having all the sexuality come at me at that point, where everybody's in a uniform and everybody looks the same. And it was very safe,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
And so I really
Yeah.
get that. I really, when you said that, I was like, I really understand that. Like,
Oh yeah.
it takes all the gender out of the equation, right? You have a uniform you put on every day, and that's what you wear.
Yeah.
Yeah,
You really do. It kind of levels the field all the way across, in that way. Now everybody obviously brings who they are and
sure.
their background to it. But I tell a lot of people when I came out, and it was kind of right before what they call the transgender tipping point. Um, the A lot of people didn't understand it, but I can't tell you how many people said, you're a great leader. You do wonderful things. You know, I'm still going to follow you. Those types of things. The general that I came out to um, got up and gave me a huge hug and said, I can't picture what you go through on a daily basis having to hide this, and I'm so sorry. And,
Yeah,
I was met. Now, there was probably about 20% of those people who were like, kick this person out.
right.
But there were also a lot of people who were, right behind me and said, who cares?
Yeah,
And I see that happen a lot in the military. I commanded a brigade in Afghanistan in 2010, 2011. And that was at the point of time while we were in Afghanistan, don't ask, don't tell was lifted. So lesbian, gay, and bi soldiers were able to serve openly at that point in time. And there was so much controversy about it. And, the world was going to fall down. Unit readiness was going to be horrible. And, the military was just going to fail. Well, here I was in the toughest environment, leading about 3,500 soldiers and airmen in Afghanistan, and we lifted Don't Ask, Don't Tell. And you know what happened?
nothing.
Nothing. If anything, it got better because those soldiers who were in their barracks having to tell their buddies, well, that person I'm chatting with every night's just my best friend or whatever, could finally say, yeah, that's my boyfriend, that's my fiance, that's my husband, that's
Right.
my wife.
Right.
Just like the rest of us could say that about our loved ones back home. I had Senator McCain, who was very much against lifting Don't Ask, Don't Tell, where we were stationed at in Afghanistan. We got a lot of the congressional delegations through our location. And Senator McCain came to my location. First question he asked me, before he asked me anything about any of the operations going on, how anything was going on, was how bad is it since we lifted Don't Ask, Don't Tell? And I literally dressed the senator down in front of my staff and everybody and said, Senator, you're dead wrong. If anything, everything is working better than it ever has because my soldiers don't have to hide. I don't have to lie because I don't want to kick out my intel analyst who I know is gay, and everybody else does, but we appreciate them. So you were forcing us to lie to keep that person in our formation because our success depended on that person.
Yeah.
And he was just like, oh, wow. I actually got a call from my commanding general after that.
Uh-oh.
Flash forward to when I'm going to my first trip over to Capitol Hill to meet with the senators on the Senate Armed Services Committee. Senator McCain was the first person on the list. And I go over there and sat down there, like three of us who were going to visit with Senator McCain. I'm the most senior person. And walk up to the secretary, and she goes, we're running a little bit behind. And I had worked enough lobbying and policy stuff that I really felt I was getting slow rolled at that point in time. And she said, we're running a little bit behind. Your appointment was supposed to be 8:30, but can we, we're going to ask you to wait a little bit. And I was like, well, time out. Got a very full day, and you've got a ton of staffers here. If you can't get a staffer to us, just say so and we'll move on and I'll go to the next person. She was like, no, absolutely not. The senator told me he wants to meet with you all in person, and give me your schedule and I'll rearrange your schedule so the senator can meet with you. He became the one of our strongest advocates for lifting the ban. In fact, he and Senator Collins actually sponsored a bill within the Senate to lift the ban. And at that point in time, the majority leader wouldn't let that bill go to the floor. But he remembered me when he came to the office and was like, and he goes, you and I had a discussion in Afghanistan kind of along these lines. And I was like, oh my gosh, here it goes again. Now I'm on his turf. And he was like, and you were right. And he goes, nice. I was wrong. I can admit it. And we're going to do everything. I'm going to do everything I can help, because nice. He goes, anybody who wants to serve in the military that is physically and mentally able to needs to be there.
Right.
And I was like, yes.
I love that. What a great story. Yeah. John McCain turnaround. That's huge. Right here on The Real Reveal, people. That's awesome.
You heard it. You heard
it here on The Real Reveal. That's awesome. Very cool. What a great story. Yeah. So you have to be the first person to ever transition on the job in the military.
I think, I don't know if I was the first person, because like I said, with so many leaders, just like your leaders, if they felt supportive of an individual, a lot of times there's a lot of stuff that gets swept under the rug, good and bad,
right.
in military.
Right.
So there may have been other individuals that I don't know about, but I do know at that point in time I was the most senior out person.
Yeah.
And there were several starting about 4 months after I came out, the Secretary of Defense, Ash Carter at that time, put out that they were not going to discharge anybody who was transgender for solely being transgender until everything was worked out with the ban. So
Wow.
they were administratively, he was calling it administratively holding all the discharges at his office.
Okay.
So, in other words, all of those files were going into the undersecretary's desk.
Right. So how long were you in the military as out? Because then you retired from the military after that, right?
2 years.
2 years.
Two
Got it.
years.
Yeah.
Yeah. And I was not able to change my records until the day I retired. The day I retired, all my records switched over.
Okay.
Um, and which was a wonderful thing.
Sure.
That was a great feeling.
Right. And for our
But
listeners, because people get confused about this, when you say your records, what she's talking about things like changing the name and changing the birth markers and all these things. That's what she's referring to when she's talking about her paperwork,
yes,
things like that. It's important to us trans people because those are the actual documents that say who we are to the government.
yeah,
Right? And
uh,
so and so
absolutely.
those documents are a very important piece of a trans person's transition, right? It's really important for us. So
Oh, it's huge. And my retirement certificate that President Obama signed has my authentic name on it.
yay.
And all of those things, being able to go back through um, my history in the military and all my official documents, and now see my authentic name on those. And my diploma from Command and General Staff College, my diploma from War College, all of those, seeing my authentic name on all of those
Yeah.
is fabulous. Now, the War College did tell me all of their graduates, what they do with every class, they hang a big brass plaque on the side of the building with all the class graduates.
Mm.
And I was told by the commandant of the War College that if I wanted to change my name on the plaque, I would have to personally pay for that. And I was like, oh no, that's okay.
It's okay. I'll leave that one alone. That's delightful. So there's something that I really want to broach on that, I think it's a fun conversation. And the women, especially that I've worked with and that love to have this conversation. But especially given that you're in such a masculine and male dominated, uber masculine profession, right? You're pretty butch, in a pretty butch profession. Talk to me about losing your white male privilege.
Oh my gosh. Did not realize it until um, until after I had retired and really came to the civil. Well, even in the military world, let's put it this way: everybody you have to act a certain way in that hypermasculine environment of the military to succeed. And I hear this from a lot of female veterans, just like myself. You go you learn certain tactics to get by in the military world, and you're very direct. You're a little bit louder. And it's accepted. And then you come out in the civilian world and you try to apply those same tactics, and everybody's going, why is this woman behaving this way? You get that. No, I actually had somebody tell me, and this sounds cliche, but on a car repair, told me, um, "Can I just get your husband's number?" Call him.
Those are my favorite ones.
Because I was arguing with him about, and he saw the wedding ring on my finger, and I'm arguing with him about the repairs on my vehicle and what my vehicle really needed. And
Right.
he's like, no, this is this. And you just don't understand, sweetie. Can I get your husband's number and give him a call?
What did you say?
Oh, I lost it. There are points in time where I say, well, Colonel Wheeler is popping out, and Colonel Wheeler popped out.
Oh, I
We just
bet.
lost it at that point in time and said, absolutely not. I'm the decision maker. You know, we're going to do it this way. I ended up leaving that, talking to that person's supervisor and leaving that dealership and going someplace else to get my Jeep repaired. So yeah, there's a huge difference. I've had people who are enormously accepting, enormously caring, and I know their hearts are certainly in the right spot, but actually tell me in meetings, well, you got a little bit too loud in that meeting. And it was like, what do you mean? What, how did I get a little bit too loud? Would you be saying that to
Do-
any guy standing here in this group? No. So yeah, seeing that difference really is eye opening.
yeah.
And I can only that opens up the whole book of privilege. When I don't say this proudly, but when I first came out, I was like, I'm out. I'm, just like every other minority now. We're all fighting together and and not recognizing the privilege that I had in my life. And I couldn't understand when other people would go, you can't do that. You can't. Well, yeah, I can. I'm a minority right alongside you. And it took me a while to understand the what privilege really is, and how number one, you have to appreciate it, because oftentimes we overlook it, especially, and that's something I recognized when I was in the military, going to some spots where it was like, I wish I could drag Americans over here to see how appreciative these people are of how they live and how much we complain. And then, and then working through that piece of personal privilege and recognizing, my education, my skin color, everything has given me this opportunity to be here. And if any one of those things was different, I wouldn't be here. I would likely be struggling in a completely different way.
Right.
So,
Right. Yeah, thanks for speaking to that. I always think it's just such an interesting conversation. Having been a woman, especially a woman in business, and then been a man in business, the difference is so stark. Sometimes it's just so interesting to, and my trans women
oh yeah,
friends
yeah.
often talk about that day when they really, the day it became so obvious that their male privilege was gone and that they were now going to be being talked to like women get talked to. And it was
Oh,
eye opening for them. It's like, what?
absolutely.
I had no idea. Yeah.
Absolutely. And then I went through, and I think a lot of trans people go through this, but I went through what I call a pink fog phase,
Mm,
as a trans woman, or maybe the blue fog phase as a trans man, where you're going, I gotta be the stereotypical way.
right.
And, I've always been a sports person, so a hunter, fisherman,
Mhm,
and I put all of that away,
mhm.
and I put riding motorcycles away, and I put all of these things away because I thought they didn't fit.
Right.
And then when I started pulling them back out, you kind of get a little bit of a reaction of, a lot of times it'll be, yeah, that's really cool that you do those things, but you still get that reaction of, wow, I can't believe it's still that, almost, I can't believe you do those things.
Right.
And so it's interesting,
Yeah.
how gender really rules our lives in so many different ways.
Yeah. It's like your genitals dictate what activities you should be able to do.
Exactly.
It's
And
ridiculous.
how you look on the outside. I always tell people as I progress more and more in my journey, I'm realizing that I find myself becoming more and more non-binary in a lot of ways.
Yeah, for sure.
Um, I like to present a certain way, but there are things that I don't want my gender role in society to dictate exactly what I can do. That
Right.
that to me, that's just ridiculous.
It is ridiculous. Yeah. So you're married, right?
Yes.
Now, here's something interesting, I think, for our listeners too. And I haven't talked about it a lot, but there's something interesting that happens to us when we're trans people in terms of our sexual orientation going along the way, right? So I've always been into high femme women, and so then I was a lesbian into femme women, and then or a butch lesbian, and then a dude that was always into women, which gave me heterosexual privilege, right? So people always looked at us like, oh well, there's a cute little straight couple, right? And we still get that heterosexual privilege, which blew my mind. I had no idea that existed that much until I got it. But then you like, have you always been into women?
I consider myself pansexual.
Okay.
So
Okay.
very much attracted to the person for the person as who they are, not so much around their gender.
Right.
Um, and so and again, in that period, I've always been more attracted to women, but in that period when I first started transitioning, I was in that pain fog. I was convinced I had to find a guy,
Yeah.
and I was dating men. And actually, my wife now and I were roommates, and we
Mm,
were both dating guys because we thought that's what we needed to do.
right.
That whole perfect 1950s. I'm going to meet my man at the door with the martini glass, and
Yeah.
no.
That's hilarious. But I totally get that. And, I know a million trans people. So it always comes out, you never know how it's going to work out. I was afraid. I knew so many trans guys that, like went gay is what I call it. Like, because they, like, and I have a few friends that are like, I'm gay no matter what. Like, if I'm a woman, I'm with a woman. And when I turn into a man, I'm with a man, like that. And so I was
Yeah.
convinced that I might want to get into guys. I don't know. I don't know what's going to happen. I just
Yeah.
didn't know what's going to happen. But it's so interesting because, it changes for people. And so now you're in a lesbian couple, technically, like that's how the world would see you, right?
Yeah.
And that's a
Yeah.
completely different experience for you, right?
That's how they see us. And when you go out, a lot of times, it's the little thing, like you were saying, heterosexual privilege, and people go, well, what the heck is that? Well, if I'm at a baseball game, do I feel comfortable holding my wife's hand? you
Right.
know Having to think about, just even in those environments, are people thinking, are they recognize, number one, are they recognizing us as a couple, and if they do, are we safe?
Right.
um, that that always becomes a little bit of a, but yeah, we're a wonderful, happy lesbian couple.
I love it. And that's awesome. Well, Before we go, I want to remind people that we have a Patreon. It's a new thing too that I'm just learning about than we're doing. And I'm excited about it because, a lot of my time has been shifted over to doing this, which I adore. But I'm also not doing as much consulting business. So this Patreon is a nice way to help me out in between because I love this work and I think these conversations are important. So I want to invite everybody over to the Patreon page and remind you again, give some love to our sponsors. Our sponsor, fireandbliss.com, Fire and Bliss Creative. And don't forget that if you use the word reveal as a coupon, you get a 20% off your first purchase of art. And we want to make sure everybody's buying art from queer people and Black and Indigenous peoples. So I wanted to remind everybody about that. And then I just want to thank you. Is there anything? Thank you so much for being here. I'm delighted that, I have known you, but when we get together with all those people, there's so many, like we don't really have a chance to sit down and really get to know one another
Oh
much.
yeah.
And so I have just really enjoyed this opportunity to get to know a little bit more of your backstory and some of the stuff that you've done. And I just appreciate you so much, and especially everything you've done for our community and continue to do as executive director of the chamber over in Kansas City. Is there anything else you wanted to share with our audience?
Well, I just wanted to say thank you, Jay, because that means the world coming from you, because you've done and continue to do so much for our community and are just really really kind of a cornerstone for a lot of us. So I really appreciate it.
Well, thank you. I appreciate that. It just hit me in the heart there. So, all right. Well, I love you and I appreciate you and I thank you for being here and thank you all for listening to the Gender Reveal Party and love you. Bye. Hey, thanks for listening to the Gender Reveal Party podcast. I hope you loved it. And if you did, would you take a second and go do all the things like subscribe, rate, review, tell all your friends? Apparently, if you do that, the podcast platforms are more likely to share it. And if you think these stories are important, please take 3 minutes to just go do that. I'd really appreciate it. Also, I'd love to connect with you on social. On Instagram and Facebook, I'm at the Gender Reveal Party. And on Twitter, I'm at Pryor J. It's a real joy and privilege to bring you this podcast. Come back soon. Love you. Bye.